I only needed a thick layer of foundation to cover the purple mark on my collarbone. Just one more live stream, and the world would keep believing my perfect lie. But when the makeup artist froze over the finger-shaped bruises, she whispered that this was not a fall. She asked who hurt me. In that second, the silence I had maintained for 10 years began to shatter. My name is Laura Chang, and sitting in this high-backed leather chair under the blinding lights of Nova Spark Studios, I felt less like a person and more like a carefully constructed exhibit. The air in the makeup room was frigid, pumped in by industrial vents to keep the expensive equipment from overheating, but sweat was pooling at the base of my spine. I stared at my reflection in the oversized mirror, analyzing the woman looking back at me. She looked successful. She looked composed. She looked like the devoted partner of Denver's most charismatic media mogul. She was a lie. We were 10 minutes away from going live, not just a standard broadcast, but the kind of milestone event that the network had been promoting for weeks. The Golden Couple of Colorado. They called us. 50,000 concurrent viewers were already waiting in the lobby stream, and by the time the main feed went up, that number would likely triple. I knew the script by heart. I knew when to smile, when to laugh at Brandon's jokes, and exactly how to tilt my head so the lighting caught my good side. But today, the choreography felt different. Today, the stakes were physical. I shifted slightly in the chair, and a sharp, hot pain radiated from my collarbone up to my ear. I flinched, biting the inside of my cheek to keep my expression neutral. Maya, the lead makeup artist for the studio, paused. She was a woman of few words, known for her surgical precision with a contour brush and her ability to make a hangover look like a spa day. She had been doing my face for 2 years, and usually, our time in the chair was a comfortable silence filled with the soft scratching of bristles against skin. Today, however, the silence felt heavy, static. "Chin up, please," Maya said softly. Her voice was professional, but I caught the slight furrow in her brow in the mirror reflection. I lifted my chin, but my hand instinctively flew up to the collar of my silk blouse. I tugged the fabric higher, trying to close the gap between the material and my jawline. It was a defensive reflex I had developed over the last 6 months, a muscle memory born of necessity. "Laura, I need to blend the neck," Maya said, her hand hovering with a damp beauty sponge. "The foundation line is visible. We are shooting in 4K today. Every pore is going to show." "It's fine," I said, my voice sounding tinny and breathless to my own ears. "I did a little touch-up myself before I came in. I think it is good." Maya stopped completely. She lowered her hand and looked me in the eye through the mirror. "You used the heavy-duty stage concealer, the stuff we use to cover tattoos." My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I had hoped she wouldn't notice. I had applied 3 layers of the thick, waxy paste in the bathroom stall 10 minutes ago. Praying the dim light in there hadn't deceived me. I had a breakout. Stress. You know how big today is." Maya didn't answer. She gently reached out, her fingers cool and dry. I wanted to pull away, to slap her hand aside and run out of the room, but I was frozen. The paralysis of the victim, that is what the therapists call it in the books I read in incognito tabs at 2 a.m, the freeze response. She hooked her index finger under the collar of my blouse and pulled it down. Just an inch. Just enough. The studio lights were unforgiving, even through the layers of beige camouflage I had plastered over my skin. The texture was wrong. The swelling underneath pushed the makeup upward, creating a topography of violence that no amount of powder could flatten. Maya took a makeup wipe and, before I could stop her, pressed it firmly against the hollow of my throat, just below the jawline. She swiped once. The beige smear came away on the white cloth, revealing the truth beneath. It was ugly, a deep, sick violet color that was already fading to a greenish yellow at the edges. But it wasn't the color that made the air leave the room. It was the shape. 4 distinct ovals, and on the other side of my neck, a single, larger bruise. It was a handprint. I saw the realization hit Maya's face in slow motion. Her eyes widened behind her black-rimmed glasses. and her breath hitched. She pulled her hand back as if my skin had burned her. "I hit the kitchen cabinet," I blurted out. The lie tasted like ash in my mouth. It was the same lie I had told my mother last Thanksgiving when my wrist was sprained. It was the same lie I told Tyler when I had a split lip in July. I was reaching for the blender on the top shelf, and I slipped. The corner of the door caught me. I am so clumsy lately. My voice was rising, pitching higher with every word, desperate to fill the silence with noise, with anything that could drown out the visual evidence screaming from my neck. Maya stared at the bruise. She didn't look at my face. She looked at the marks. "Laura," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper that cut through the hum of the air conditioning. "Cabinets do not have fingers." The denial died in my throat. I sat there, exposed, my hands gripping the armrests of the chair so hard my knuckles turned white. From the hallway outside, a voice boomed, loud, confident, and terrifyingly familiar. "Lighting check on stage 1. I want the spotlight to hit center stage exactly when I drop to one knee. Timing is everything. People." It was Brandon. He sounded exuberant. He was rehearsing the moment that was supposed to be the happiest of my life. He was out there, charming the camera crew, joking with the producers, playing the role of the devoted boyfriend preparing to propose to his high school sweetheart. The world saw a golden boy, a visionary media entrepreneur who had pulled himself up by his bootstraps. They didn't see the man who, 18 hours ago, had pinned me against the granite island in our kitchen because I told him I wasn't ready to sign over the access rights to my grandmother's trust fund. They didn't feel the crushing pressure of his thumb against my windpipe as he whispered that I was ungrateful, selfish, and that he was doing this for us. The vibration of my phone on the vanity table made me jump. The screen lit up, buzzing angrily against the glass surface. New message from Mom. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't help it. The preview text scrolled across the locked screen. "Brandon says he has a big surprise for you tonight. Do not ruin this. Laura, you know how hard he has worked for this contract. Smile and support him. Tyler needs this deal to go through." Another buzz, immediate. New message from Tyler. "Sis, don't forget to mention the Iron Gate partnership when Brandon brings up the expansion. I have investors watching. Don't be weird today. Dad says you looked moody yesterday." I felt a wave of nausea roll through me, my family, my blood. They were not in the room, yet they were suffocating me just as effectively as Brandon's hands had, for 10 years. I had been the fuel they burned to keep their engines running. I was the responsible one, the one who didn't cause scenes, the one who absorbed the debt, the stress, and the anger, so that Tyler could play business owner and Mom could play the socialite. They didn't know about the bruises, or maybe they did, and they had chosen not to see them. I honestly didn't know which was worse. "Laura?" Maya's voice pulled me back from the edge of a panic attack. She wasn't holding the brush anymore. She had set it down on the table with a deliberate click. She wasn't looking at my reflection. She had turned the chair so I had to face her directly. "Look at me," she commanded. It wasn't a request. I forced my eyes to meet hers. My vision was blurring with tears I refused to shed. If I cried, my eyes would swell, and then everyone would know. I couldn't let everyone know. The script. I had to stick to the script. "We have to cover it," I whispered, pleading. "Maya, please, just cover it. He is going to propose. Millions of people are going to be watching. If I go out there looking like this, it will ruin him. It will ruin everything." "It is not a cabinet," Maya said. She wasn't asking. She was stating a fact. "Please," I begged, my voice cracking, "just do your job." Maya looked at the door where Brandon's laughter was echoing down the hall. Then she looked back at the purple marks on my neck. I saw something harden in her expression. In this industry, makeup artists are trained to be invisible. They are the keepers of secrets. They see the scars, the acne, the aging lines, and they erase them so the fantasy can continue. I expected her to pick up the color corrector. I expected her to sigh, mix a batch of green neutralizer, and paint over my pain like she had done a dozen times before for other clients with other secrets. But she didn't pick up the brush. "This is not normal," she said. The words hung in the air, heavy and absolute. "It was an accident," I recited automatically, though the conviction was gone. "No," Maya interrupted, leaning in closer. "I have seen accidents. I have seen girls who walked into doors. I have seen girls who fell down stairs. This?" She gestured to my neck. "This is intentional. This is a grip. Someone held you down. Laura." I couldn't breathe. My chest felt like it was being crushed by a vice. Hearing it said out loud, hearing a stranger validate the reality I had been gaslighting myself about for months, was terrifying. It made it real, as long as it was a secret. I could pretend it was a misunderstanding. I could pretend he didn't mean it. I could pretend it was my fault for provoking him. But once Maya said it, the illusion shattered. "I can't talk about this," I whispered. "Not now. There is no time." The digital clock on the wall turned red. 5 minutes to air. 5 minutes to air. The stage manager's voice crackled over the intercom system. "Talent to set, please. Talent to set." I moved to stand up, desperate to escape the interrogation, to get back to the safety of the script. But Maya didn't move out of my way. She stood between me and the door, a small barrier against the inevitable. "You are going to go out there," Maya said, her voice low and hurried, "and he is going to ask you to marry him, and you are going to say yes, and then you are going to go home with him." I looked down at my hands. "I have to, my family, the trust fund. Everything is tied up in this." "He hurt you," Maya said. "He loves me," I countered weaky. "He is just under a lot of pressure." "Pressure breaks pipes, Laura. It doesn't break windpipes." The brutality of her sentence slapped me harder than Brandon ever had. I stared at her, stunned into silence. The intercom buzzed again. "Laura Chang to set. 2 minutes. We need a mic check." I felt the vibration of my phone again. Another text from Brandon. "Get your ass out here. Don't make me look stupid." I reached for the foundation bottle myself, my hands shaking so bad I almost knocked it over. "Give me the sponge, Maya. If you won't do it, I will." Maya looked at my trembling hands. She looked at the text on my screen that I hadn't hidden quickly enough. She took a deep breath, and for a second, I thought she was going to walk out and leave me to handle the mess alone. Instead, she picked up the brush. "Sit down," she said. I collapsed back into the chair. Maya began to work, but she didn't just cover the bruise. She worked with a ferocity I had never seen. She layered the green corrector, then the peach, then the foundation, then the powder. She was erasing the evidence, but her eyes were blazing. 10, 9, 8. The countdown echoed from the hallway. The energy outside was reaching a fever pitch. Applause was starting from the studio audience. Maya finished. She spun the chair around so I faced the door. I looked perfect, flawless. The bruise was gone. The mask was back in place. I stood up, my legs feeling like jelly. I smoothed down my skirt. "Thank you," I whispered, not meeting her eyes. I reached for the door handle. "Laura," Maya said. I paused, my hand on the cold metal lever. Maya walked up behind me. She didn't touch me, but she leaned in close enough that I could smell the peppermint of her gum and the faint scent of antiseptic. "You are going to walk out there," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly with a rage I didn't understand yet. "You are going to smile, but listen to me carefully." She waited until I turned my head slightly to acknowledge her. "I took a picture," she said. My blood ran cold. "What?" "Before I covered it, when you looked at your phone, I took a picture of your neck. High resolution." "Maya, you can't—" "I did," she cut me off, "and I am not deleting it." 1 minute to air. Laura, let's go." Brandon's voice was closer now, laced with irritation masked as excitement. Maya stepped back, crossing her arms over her chest. She looked like a soldier standing guard. "You have been protecting everyone else for 10 years, she said. her voice dropping to a whisper that sounded like a scream in the quiet room. Your mother? Your brother? Him? But look at your neck, Laura. I could feel the phantom pressure of Brandon's fingers even through the makeup. This isn't normal, she repeated, her eyes locking onto mine, refusing to let me look away. And this time, you cannot stay silent, because next time he won't leave a bruise. He will leave a body. The door flew open, and production assistant stood there, headset on, clipboard in hand. Laura, we are live in 30 seconds. Go, go, go. I stepped out into the blinding hallway light, leaving the safety of the dark room behind. But Maya's words were ringing in my ears louder than the applause waiting for me. Next time, he will leave a body. I walked toward the stage, toward the man who claimed to love me, toward the millions of people watching, and for the first time in my life, the script in my head went blank. As the red light of the camera faded from my mind's eye, the memories flooded in, dragging me back to where the silence began. It did not start with Brandon. It did not start with a slap or a shove or a grip on my wrist. It started much earlier, in a house that smelled of lemon polish and potpourri, on a quiet cul-de-sac in the suburbs of Denver, where the lawns were manicured to within an inch of their lives and the fences were painted a blinding, virtuous white. My childhood home was a masterpiece of suburban performance art. To the neighbors, the Chang family was the epitome of the American dream realized. My father was a hard-working architect who designed skyline-altering structures, and my mother was the perfect hostess, a woman who could organize a charity gala with one hand while arranging a floral centerpiece with the other. And then there were the children, Tyler and Laura, the heir and the spare, though they never said it quite so crudely. I was the spare. I do not remember the first time I heard the phrase, but it is etched into the marrow of my bones. Laura is such an easy child. My mother would say it to her friends over cups of herbal tea. Her voice lowered to a conspiratorial whisper as I sat in the corner, coloring quietly within the lines. She is so low maintenance. We never have to worry about her. They meant it as a compliment. I know that now. They thought they were praising my obedience, my lack of demands, my ability to occupy myself without needing their constant attention. But to a 6-year-old girl, and then a 10-year-old, and then a 16-year-old, low maintenance did not sound like praise. It sounded like an instruction. It told me that my value lay in my invisibility. It told me that the less space I took up, the more they loved me. Tyler, on the other hand, took up all the space. My brother was 2 years younger than me, but from the moment he arrived, the gravitational pull of our household shifted entirely to orbit around him. Tyler was loud. Tyler was demanding. Tyler was brilliant, they said, though his brilliance usually manifested as a chaotic energy that required constant management. If Tyler sneezed, the entire household stopped to check the thermostat. If I ran a fever, I was told to take an aspirin and go to bed early so I would not spread germs to Tyler before his big game. The disparity was never more glaring than on our birthdays. I remember my 12th birthday vividly. It fell on a Tuesday. I had woken up with that flutter of childish hope in my chest, wondering if this year might be different. I went downstairs to the kitchen, where my mother was already packing Tyler's lunch. There were no balloons. There was no banner. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," my mother had said, kissing the top of my head without looking away from the sandwich she was cutting. "We are going to have a nice quiet dinner tonight, just the 4 of us. Dad has a late meeting, so we will eat around 8. That was it. A quiet dinner, chicken and rice, because it was easy. My gift was a new set of encyclopedias for school and a savings bond that I could not touch until I was 18. "Sensible," my father had said, beaming at me. "You are such a sensible girl. Laura, you appreciate the value of the future." 2 months later, Tyler turned 10. The house was transformed. They rented a bouncy castle that took up the entire backyard. A professional magician was hired for $300 an hour. 50 kids from his school were invited, and the noise was deafening. There was a mountain of presents wrapped in shiny silver paper. video games, a new bicycle, a remote-controlled car that cost more than my entire wardrobe. I remember standing by the sliding glass door, holding a tray of cupcakes I had helped my mother bake because the caterer had forgotten dessert. One of the neighbors, Mrs. Miller, came up to me. She was a kind woman, or she tried to be. She patted my shoulder and looked at the chaos of screaming boys in the yard. "You are such a good helper, Laura," she had said. "Look at you, so poised amidst all this madness. You are practically a little adult already." I smiled. I always smiled. That was part of being the easy child. You smile, you nod, and you serve the cupcakes. But inside, I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the tray on the pristine white carpet. I wanted to ask why Tyler's joy was a public spectacle worth thousands of dollars, while my existence was something to be managed with efficiency and thrift. But I did not scream. I walked out into the yard and handed a cupcake to my brother. He took it without looking at me, already running off to show his friends his new sneakers. It was not just the celebrations, it was the resources. It was the subtle, insidious way money and time were allocated. I was a straight-A student. My report cards were boringly perfect. 98% in math, 99% in English. When I brought them home, my father would glance at them, nod once, and sign the back. "Of course," he would say, "we expect nothing less from you, Laura." There was no reward for meeting expectations. The baseline for me was perfection. Anything less would have been a failure, but achieving it was merely adequate. Tyler struggled. He got C's in history. He barely passed algebra, but when he managed to scrape a B- on a science project, a project I stayed up until 2 a.m. helping him glue together, my parents threw a celebration dinner at the most expensive steakhouse in Denver. "Look at that!" my father had roared, clapping Tyler on the back. He really buckled down. That is the Chang spirit. I sat there cutting my steak, feeling the familiar coldness spreading in my chest. I had tutored him. I had written the index cards for his presentation. I had organized his backpack so he would not lose his notes. But the victory belonged to him. My labor was invisible, dissolved into the ether of helping family. As I entered my teenage years, I tried to carve out something for myself. I discovered that I loved to create. I would spend hours in my room, filling cheap notebooks with stories and sketches. I drew the mountains visible from my window. I wrote poems about the silence of snow. For the first time, I felt like I had a voice, even if it was only on paper. When I was 15, I worked up the courage to show my mother my portfolio. I wanted to apply to a summer art program in Boulder. It cost $500. I found her in the sunroom, reviewing the household budget. I laid the sketchbook on the table, my heart hammering against my ribs, just like it was doing now in the makeup chair. "Mom," I said, "I want to be an artist or a writer. Look." She flipped through the pages. Her expression was mild, unreadable. She did not frown, but she did not smile. She looked at my drawings the way one looks at a grocery list, checking for errors, assessing utility. "These are nice, Laura," she said finally, closing the book. "But be realistic. How does drawing help you in the real world?" "I want to go to this program," I said, pushing the brochure toward her. "It is only 5 weeks." She sighed, the sound of a martyr bearing a heavy cross. "Oh, honey, we just put down the deposit for Tyler's hockey camp. You know how expensive the equipment is this year, and the travel team fees are astronomical." "But Tyler doesn't even like hockey," I protested, the frustration bubbling up. "He wants to quit." "He has potential," she said firmly. "He needs extracurriculars for his college applications. We have to prioritize the investments that yield the highest return. Art is, well, it is a nice hobby, Laura, but it is not a career. It is not practical. You are the sensible one, remember? You understand that we cannot throw money away on daydreams." Investments, that was what we were. I was a bond with a low but steady yield, safe and boring. Tyler was a volatile tech stock, risky and expensive, into which they poured every spare cent in the hopes of a massive payout. So I stopped drawing. I stopped writing. I put the notebooks in a box at the bottom of my closet and focused on what they wanted. I joined the debate club because it looked good on a resume. I took advanced placement economics because my father said it was useful. I became the person they drafted in their blueprints. By the time I was 16, my role was cemented. I was the cleaner. I was the fixer. I was the shadow. When Tyler crashed the car 3 weeks after getting his license, I was the one who picked him up, drove him home, and helped him formulate a story to tell Dad that minimized his recklessness. When my mother had her migraines, I was the one who cooked dinner, folded the laundry, and ensured the house remained spotless so she could rest. The neighbors and my teachers praised me constantly. "Laura is so mature." They would say, "She is an old soul." They did not see that my maturity was a survival mechanism. I had learned that needs were a liability. If I had a need, it created friction. If I had a desire, it created conflict. So I amputated my desires. I starved my needs until they were small enough to hide in the pockets of my oversized sweaters. I never asked for new clothes. I wore hand-me-downs from cousins or bought generic brands from the discount rack. I never asked for a car. I took the bus or walked. I never asked for help with my homework. I stayed up until midnight figuring it out myself. And in the vacuum of my silence, Tyler expanded. He sucked up the air, the money, the attention. He learned that he could break things and they would be replaced. He learned that he could fail and he would be rescued. He learned that women, starting with his mother and sister, existed to smooth the jagged edges of his life so he could walk on velvet. I remember one specific afternoon when I was 17. I was scrubbing the grout in the kitchen floor with a toothbrush, a chore my mother had suggested would be good for my character, while Tyler sat at the counter eating a bowl of cereal, watching me. "You missed a spot," he said, pointing with his spoon. I looked up at him. He wasn't being malicious, exactly. He was just stating a fact from his position of comfort. He genuinely believed it was my job to clean the floor and his job to watch. "Why don't you help me?" I asked. He laughed, milk dripping down his chin. "Mom said you are better at it. Besides, I have practice in an hour." He hopped off the stool, leaving the bowl and the spoon on the counter. He didn't even put them in the sink. He just walked away, whistling, stepping over my legs as I knelt on the cold tiles. I watched him go, and I felt a strange, hollow sensation in my stomach. It wasn't anger. Anger requires fire, and I had been doused with cold water for too long. It was a realization. I existed to fill the gaps. I was the mortar between the bricks of their lives. I held the structure together, but I was not the structure itself. No one looks at the mortar. No one admires it. They only notice it when it cracks. That night, I looked in the mirror. I saw a girl with sensible hair, sensible clothes, and empty eyes. I wondered if there was anything inside me other than the desire to please. I wondered if I stripped away the duties, the chores, the yes mom, and the of course dad. Would there be a person left? Or was I just a collection of reactions to other people's needs? I grew up believing that love was a transaction. You perform a service, and in exchange, you are allowed to remain in the house. You absorb the stress, and in exchange, they tell you you are a good girl. You disappear, and they love you for your absence. I carried that belief like a heavy stone in my pocket when I left for college. I carried it into my first job, and I carried it, unknowingly, into the arms of Brandon Cole. When I met Brandon, I thought I had found someone different. I thought I had found someone who saw the artist, the writer, the girl with the fire inside. But as I sat in the makeup chair at Nova Spark Studios, with Maya's words ringing in my ears and the makeup settling over the bruises on my neck, I realized the terrifying truth. I hadn't found someone different. I had found home. Brandon was Tyler with a better vocabulary and a bigger bank account. He was the sun, demanding orbit, and I, the trained professional of invisibility, had slotted perfectly into the role I had been rehearsing since I was 6 years old. I was the easy girlfriend, the low-maintenance partner, the one who cleans up the mess. But cabinets don't have fingers. And floors don't leave bruises. The memory of my childhood faded as the studio manager knocked on the door again. 30 seconds. Laura. I stood up. The little girl who scrubbed the grout was still inside me, terrified of making a scene. But the woman with the bruised neck was starting to wake up. The easy child was about to become the most difficult person they had ever met. My 20s were supposed to be the era of my liberation. That is what the movies promised. And that is what the brochures for out-of-state universities sold with their glossy photos of students laughing on sun-drenched quads. I had been accepted to a liberal arts college in Oregon, a place where the air smelled of rain and pine, a place where nobody knew that Laura Chang was the girl who fixed everything. I had the acceptance letter taped to the inside of my closet door for 3 days. Then came the family meeting. It was not an argument. Arguments imply two sides. This was a demolition. My mother wept about her fragile health and how she would manage the house without me. My father did the math on a yellow legal pad, showing me the economical senselessness of paying for room and board when we lived 40 minutes from a perfectly good university. Tyler just asked who would proofread his essays if I moved 2 states away. So I stayed. I enrolled at the local university, commuting from the house in the suburbs every morning in a beat-up sedan that rattled when it hit 60 miles per hour. While my peers were discovering who they were in dorm rooms and late-night study sessions, I was rushing home to marinate chicken for dinner or driving Tyler to lacrosse practice because Mom had a headache. I was a student by day and a servant by night. To maintain my sanity, I got a job. I started working at a small coffee shop downtown, the kind with exposed brick walls and customers who sat for 3 hours nursing a single latte. I loved it. For the first time, my labor had a direct, tangible value. I wiped a table, and it was clean. I made a cappuccino, and someone said thank you. I worked double shifts, standing on my feet for 10 or 12 hours at a time, savoring the ache in my legs because it belonged to me. But the money did not stay mine for long. It started small. Tyler needed new cleats, and Dad was cash poor until the end of the month. Mom saw a specialist for her back, and the copay was higher than expected. By the time I graduated and moved from the coffee shop to an entry-level production assistant gig at a local media company, the pattern was set in stone. I was the family bank. I remember getting my first real paycheck from the media company. It was modest, but to me, it looked like a fortune. I had planned to save 50% of it for a deposit on an apartment. I wanted a studio. I did not care if it was the size of a shoebox. I just wanted a door that I could lock. That night, my father sat me down. He poured himself a drink and sighed, talking about the rising property taxes and how the economy was squeezing honest men like him. He did not ask for the money. He never asked. He just created a problem, and he waited for me to solve it. "I can help, Dad," I had said. The words tasted like bile, but the habit was too strong to break. I transferred $700 to his account the next morning. My apartment fund vanished. I stayed in my childhood bedroom, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars I had stuck to the ceiling when I was 9, feeling like I was suffocating in slow motion. Then, I met Brandon Cole. He was not famous then. He was just a hungry, charismatic director who had been brought in to save a failing segment at the station where I was running cables and fetching coffee. He swept into the studio like a weather system, loud and electric. He was everything my father was not. He was decisive. He was modern. He listened. Our first interaction was not romantic. It was functional. The teleprompter had frozen 3 minutes before a live broadcast, and the technical director was having a meltdown, while the men in the booth were shouting at each other. I quietly bypassed the system, pulled up the script on a tablet, and manually scrolled it for the anchor, holding it just under the camera lens so his eyeline matched. When the segment ended, the studio cleared out. I was coiling a cable when I felt eyes on me. "That was smart," a voice said. I turned around. Brandon was leaning against a lighting rig, watching me. "Most people would have panicked," he continued, walking toward me. "You did not even blink. You solved the problem while everyone else was busy complaining about it." I felt a flush of heat rise up my neck. No one had ever praised my competence without immediately following it up with a request for more labor. I just wanted to get it done, I mumbled. You are wasted running cables, Brandon said. He handed me his business card. I am starting a new project. I need people who can think. Call me. I called him. Working for Brandon was like stepping into a wind tunnel. He moved fast, he dreamed big, and he dragged me along in his wake. He did not look at me and see a servant. He saw an asset. He promoted me from assistant to coordinator, and then to associate producer. For the first time in my life, I was being told that I was brilliant. You are the only one who gets it, Laura, he would say late at night, when we were the last two people in the office, ordering takeout and rewriting scripts. You see the structure of things. You bring order to chaos. I fell in love with him not because he brought me flowers, though he did, grand, expensive bouquets that filled my cubicle, but because he made me feel seen. He validated the very skills that my family had exploited. When I organized his schedule, he called me a genius. When I anticipated a budget issue, he called me a lifesaver. I thought I had found my counterpart, my partner. When Brandon founded Nova Spark Studios, he asked me to come with him. I cannot do this without you, he had said, holding my hands across a table at a bistro that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. You are the backbone of this operation, Laura. Come be my head producer. I said yes, and with that yes, I finally moved out of my parents' house. I thought I was free. I moved into Brandon's sleek, modern loft in downtown Denver. It had floor-to-ceiling windows and furniture that looked like art. I had my own office at Nova Spark. I had a title. I had a salary that made my father's eyes widen when he accidentally saw my pay stub. But that was when the dynamic shifted. My family did not mourn my departure. They adapted. They realized that Laura was no longer just the girl who cleaned the grout. Laura was now the conduit to Brandon Cole. Brandon was a rising star in Denver's business scene. He was handsome, wealthy, and influential. To my parents, he was the trophy they had always wanted. They stopped treating me like the help and started treating me like the gatekeeper to the VIP lounge. Suddenly, family dinners were no longer about guilt-tripping me into doing chores. They became strategic summits. I remember one dinner vividly. It was about 6 months after I moved in with Brandon. My mother had cooked a roast, and she had set the table with the good china, the plates she usually saved for the mayor or the bishop. Brandon sat at the head of the table. My father sat to his right. Tyler sat to his left. I sat at the other end, near the kitchen door, so I could get up to refill the water glasses. So, Brandon. My father started, pouring Brandon a glass of expensive wine that I knew he could not afford. I saw that piece about Nova Spark in the Business Journal. Impressive growth. 40% quarter over quarter. We are scaling up, Brandon said, leaning back in his chair with the easy confidence of a king holding court. Content is king. Robert, and we are building the castle. Tyler leaned in, his eyes hungry. I have been looking into real estate for studio expansion. You know, if you guys are looking for warehouses in the industrial district, I have some contacts. I could scout for you. I watched them. My brother, who had never held a job for more than 6 months, was pitching himself to my boyfriend. My father, who had dismissed my creative dreams as useless, was hanging on Brandon's every word about media synergy. That is interesting, Brandon said, nodding at Tyler. We might need someone on the ground. Laura has her hands full with the creative side. We need a man to handle the bricks and mortar. A man. I paused with the water pitcher in my hand. I can handle the site scouting. I said, I already did the preliminary research on the South Denver lots. Brandon waved a hand dismissively, not even looking at me. Babe, you are too valuable in the editing room. You do not want to be walking through dusty warehouses. Let Tyler handle the grunt work. He needs the experience. Exactly, my mother chimed in, beaming at Brandon. Laura is so busy. Tyler would be a huge help. It keeps it in the family. And just like that, the deal was struck. Tyler got a consulting contract with Nova Spark. My father got to brag to his golf buddies that his son was in business with Brandon Cole. I looked around the table. Everyone was smiling. Everyone was happy. The tension that used to suffocate our dinners was gone, replaced by the warm glow of shared ambition. I told myself this was what I wanted. I had brought my worlds together. I had elevated my family. I had a man who respected them and wanted to help them. But as the months went on, the pattern clarified. Brandon began to make decisions for me. At first, it was subtle. Wear the blue dress, not the red one. It looks more professional. Then it was operational. I moved you off the documentary project. Laura, I need you managing the sponsor accounts. You are so good with details. When I protested, saying I wanted to create, not manage spreadsheets, he would use the same words my parents used. Be sensible. Laura, we need the money from these sponsors to fund the creative stuff. You are the only one I trust with the finances. Do it for us. For us? That was the trap. Everything was for us. My paycheck went into a joint account because we are building a future. My name was on the lease, but he had the only key to the safe where our documents were kept. When I wanted to go out with my friends from college, he would pout and say he had planned a romantic night in, or he would claim he needed my help preparing for a pitch. I need you, he would whisper, kissing my forehead. I cannot do this without you. It sounded like love. It felt like addiction. The control was not a sudden slam of a cage door. It was a slow tightening of a silk rope. I was still the girl who fixed everything, only now the stakes were higher. I was managing Tyler's incompetence at the studio, redoing his work late at night so Brandon would not fire him. I was managing my parents' expectations, funneling money to them from my allowance that Brandon gave me from our joint account. I was working 18 hours a day. I was exhausted. I was thin. One evening, about a year into our relationship, I was sitting on the floor of our living room, surrounded by paperwork for a tax audit that Brandon had neglected. Tyler was on the couch, drinking a beer and watching sports on the 80-inch television Brandon had bought. Hey, Laura, Tyler said, not looking away from the screen. Can you grab me another beer when you are up? I froze. The scene superimposed itself over my childhood. Tyler on the couch, me on the floor, the request for service delivered with the casual arrogance of someone who knows he will be obeyed. I looked at the door to the home office where Brandon was on a call. I could hear his voice, smooth and commanding. My team is handling it, he was saying. Laura is on it. She is a machine. She will have it done by morning. A machine, not a partner, not a lover, a machine. I realized then, with a cold, sinking horror, that I had not escaped. I had not run away from the dynamic of my childhood. I had run directly into its deluxe, high-definition upgrade. I had traded parents who told me I was easy for a boyfriend, who told me I was useful. I had traded a brother who expected me to clean his mess for a partner who expected me to build his empire. I was not building a new family. I was just staffing a new corporation, and I was the only employee who could not quit. I stood up to get Tyler his beer. My hands were shaking. That was the first time I noticed the tremor. It was also the night Brandon grabbed my arm for the first time, just to stop me from walking away while he was talking, and left a mark that faded in an hour. I am sorry, babe, he had said, rubbing the spot. I am just stressed. You know how much this means to us. I know, I had said, I know. I was the hero of my own tragedy, saving everyone but myself. And the walls of the penthouse were just as high as the white picket fences of the suburbs. They were just made of glass, so I could see exactly what I was missing. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, a day that was usually reserved for the mundane rhythm of invoices and production schedules. It was thick, creamy, and heavy, the kind of stationery that announced its importance before you even broke the seal. The return address was embossed in raised black ink. Holloway and Associates, attorneys at law. I was standing in the kitchen of the loft I shared with Brandon, sorting through a pile of mail that was mostly bills addressed to us or invitations addressed to him. I almost missed it, but when I saw the name regarding the estate of Ruth Miller, my breath hitched. Grandma Ruth. She had passed away 6 months earlier. My mother had wept theatrically at the funeral, draping herself over the casket, While Tyler had spent the service checking his watch, I had stood in the back, dry-eyed and numb, feeling like the only person in the world who had actually known her. Ruth was my mother's mother, but she was nothing like her daughter. She was a woman of sharp edges and silent observations. She was the only one who had ever looked at me and not asked for a glass of water or a favor. I slit the envelope open with a kitchen knife. Inside, there was a letter printed on watermarked paper and a certified check. I read the letter first, then I read it again. Then I sat down on the floor, right there on the cold, polished concrete, because my legs refused to hold me. To my granddaughter, Laura. The letter read, "I watched you for 26 years. I watched you give away pieces of yourself until I was afraid there would be nothing left. This is not for your mother. This is not for your brother. And God help me, this is certainly not for that man you are living with. This is for you. For a door. For a key. Use it to buy back your life." I looked at the check. The numbers were staggering. $750,000. It was not a fortune to a billionaire, but to me, it was a lifeline. It was enough to buy a small house. It was enough to live for 10 years without working. It was enough to walk away from NovaSpark, from the joint account, from the expectations. It was freedom distilled into a strip of paper. For a specific, delirious hour, I kept it a secret. I sat in the afternoon sun, holding the check against my chest, imagining a studio apartment with big windows where I could paint again. I imagined a life where no one called my name to fix a problem. Then the front door beeped. Brandon walked in, bringing the chaotic energy of the studio with him. He was on the phone, his voice booming. "No, I told them the budget is locked. If they want the drone shots, they pay for the drone shots." He hung up and tossed his phone onto the sofa. He looked at me sitting on the floor. "Hey, babe," he said, loosening his tie. "What is that? Bad news?" I should have lied. I should have stuffed the envelope under the rug. I should have swallowed the paper whole. But the conditioning was too deep. I was the honest one. I was the transparent one. I was the one who shared everything because secrets were considered a form of betrayal in the Chang household. "It is from Grandma Ruth," I said, my voice trembling. Brandon's interest piqued. He walked over and plucked the letter from my fingers before I could offer it. He read it. Then he looked at the check. His eyes, usually warm and crinkling with laughter, went wide. Then they went flat. A calculation was happening behind his pupils, a rapid firing of synapses that had nothing to do with grief or gratitude. $750,000, he said softly. "She left it to me," I said, standing up, trying to reclaim the paper. "It is a trust." Brandon held the check just out of my reach. He smiled, but it was not his usual smile. It was the smile of a predator who has just spotted a wounded gazelle. "This is incredible," he said. "Do you know what this means, Laura? This is the capital injection we have been waiting for. We can finally upgrade the equipment for the studio. We can expand to the second floor. Tyler has been talking about that commercial real estate venture. This is the seed money." My stomach dropped. "Brandon, no, this is... The letter says it is for me." "Babe," he said, wrapping an arm around my shoulders, pulling me into his expensive cologne. "What is yours is ours. That is how a partnership works. We are building a future, right? This money sitting in a savings account earning 1% interest is a waste. We can triple this in 2 years if we invest it in the company." He was already spending it. In his mind, the money had already been transferred. "I need to think about it," I said weaky. "Of course." He kissed my temple. "We will talk about it tonight. I will call your parents. We should celebrate." The celebration was an ambush. 2 hours later, I was sitting at my parents' dining table. The roast chicken was dry, but nobody cared about the food. My mother was beaming, her eyes wet with tears that seemed to appear on command. My father was pouring the good scotch. Tyler was tapping furiously on his tablet, pulling up spreadsheets. "Mom always loved you best," my mother said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "She knew you were the sensible one. She knew you would do the right thing with this blessing." "The right thing," my father echoed. "You know, Laura, the market is volatile right now. A girl like you do not know how to manage this kind of liquidity. It is dangerous. You could lose it all to scams. You need protection. Exactly, Tyler cut in. He turned his tablet around to face me. Look at this. I have drawn up a preliminary allocation. We put $300,000 into the Nova Spark expansion. That secures Brandon's position as the market leader. Then we put $200,000 into this multi-unit housing project I'm looking at in Aurora. The rest we keep as a liquid buffer for family emergencies. Mom's medical bills are not getting any cheaper. You know. I stared at the screen. My inheritance, my freedom, had been sliced up into pieces of a pie I was not even allowed to eat. The letter said it was for me. I said, my voice was small, barely audible over the clinking of silverware. The room went silent. My father put down his glass. Laura, do not be selfish. Your grandmother was an old woman. She did not understand modern finance. She wanted the family to thrive, and right now, the family's future lies with the men who are building things. Brandon and Tyler have the vision. You have the resources. Resources. That word again. I was not a person. I was a coal mine. I was an oil field. I was thinking, Brandon said smoothly, placing his hand over mine on the table. His grip was firm, almost too firm. To make it easier for you, we should deposit the check into our joint account. I can manage the disbursements. I will handle the taxes, the legal fees, everything. You won't have to worry your pretty head about any of the boring math. He squeezed my hand. It hurt. It is a trust fund, I said. I have to meet with the lawyer tomorrow to sign the release papers. I will come with you, Brandon said immediately. No, I said. The word hung in the air like a gunshot. My mother gasped. My father frowned, his eyebrows knitting together in a dark line. Tyler laughed, a nervous, barking sound. What do you mean? No, Brandon asked. His voice was still calm, but the temperature in the room had dropped 10 degrees. The lawyer said I have to come alone. I lied. It is protocol. The next morning, I sat in the office of Mr. Holloway. He was a man of 80, with skin like parchment and eyes like flint. He had been my grandmother's attorney for 40 years. Laura, he said, looking at me over his spectacles, your grandmother was very specific. This is a spendthrift trust. Do you know what that means? I shook my head. It means the principal is protected, he explained. It means that legally, you cannot sign this over to anyone else. You cannot use it as collateral for a loan. You cannot invest it in a business that you do not own 100% of. If you try to transfer this money to a joint account with Mr. Cole or give it to your brother, I am authorized to freeze the assets immediately. I felt a wave of relief so potent it made me dizzy. So I can't give it to them? Even if I wanted to? You can withdraw monthly allowances for your living expenses, Mr. Holloway said. You can buy a home in your name. You can pay for education. But you cannot liquidate it to fund a startup or a real estate scheme. Ruth knew exactly what she was doing. She tied your hands so they could not pick your pockets. I walked out of that office feeling lighter than I had in years. I had a shield. It was not me saying no. It was the law. It was Grandma Ruth, reaching from the grave to slap their hands away. But when I got home, the relief evaporated. Brandon was waiting. He had not gone to the studio. He was sitting on the sofa, the lights off, a glass of whiskey in his hand. So, he asked, did you get the wire transfer details? I stood by the door, clutching my purse. I can't do it. Brandon. He stood up. He moved with a slow, predatory grace that I had always mistaken for confidence. What do you mean? You can't. The trust structure, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The lawyer explained it. It is locked. I can only use it for personal expenses. I can't invest it. I can't transfer it. If I try, the bank freezes everything. Brandon stared at me. For a long minute, he did not speak. Then he laughed. It was a cold, ugly sound. You are lying, he said. I am not. I said, here's the paperwork. I handed him the legal documents Mr. Holloway had prepared. Brandon scanned them. his eyes darting back and forth. His face turned red, then a blotchy, pale white. He crumpled the papers in his fist. "This is ridiculous," he spat. "We can break this. We can contest it. Your grandmother was senile. We can prove she was not of sound mind." "No," I said, "I won't do that." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and for the first time, I saw the mask slip completely. The charming, supportive partner vanished. In his place was a man who looked at me with pure, unadulterated contempt. "You are being incredibly selfish." "Laura," he said, his voice dropping to a low growl, "after everything I have done for you, I gave you a career, I gave you a home, I gave your brother a job, and now, when you have the chance to pay me back, to help us, you hide behind some dead old woman's paperwork?" "It is not my choice," I pleaded. "It is the law." "It is always a choice," he shouted, throwing the glass against the wall. It shattered, shards of crystal raining down on the hardwood floor. I flinched, stepping back. "Clean that up," he said. He walked past me, bumping my shoulder hard enough to make me stumble. He went into the bedroom and slammed the door. I stood there, looking at the broken glass. My heart was pounding in my throat. I knew, with a terrifying clarity, that the rules had changed. Until now, my value had been my utility. I was the worker bee. But now, I was the gatekeeper to a fortune they felt entitled to, and I had locked the gate. The campaign began the next day. It was psychological warfare. My mother called me 3 times a day, crying, "How can you do this to Tyler? He told his investors he had the funding. He is going to lose face. He is going to be ruined. And it is your fault." Tyler sent me text messages that ranged from begging to threatening. "You think you are better than us now? You think because you have grandma's money you can look down on us? Watch your back, Laura." But Brandon was the worst. He stopped touching me. He stopped looking at me during dinner. He would speak to me only in commands. Iron my shirt, make the coffee, send the email. If I tried to start a conversation, he would put in his noise-canceling headphones. He began to gaslight me about the money. "You know, everyone at the studio is talking about how greedy you are," he said one night as we lay in bed, his back turned to me. "They know about the inheritance. I tried to defend you. But honestly, Laura, it is hard to defend someone who cares more about a bank balance than her own family. I am not greedy." I whispered into the darkness. "I just want to be safe." "Safe?" He rolled over, looming over me in the dark. "You are safe because of me. You exist because of me. Do not forget that." Then came the physical escalation. It started as accidents, a bump in the hallway that sent me into the doorframe, a hand gripping my arm too tight when he was guiding me through a crowd. One evening, about 2 weeks after the letter arrived, we were in the kitchen. I was washing dishes. Brandon was drinking. He had been drinking a lot lately. "I spoke to a lawyer of my own," he said, leaning against the counter. "He says if we get married, the trust becomes marital property in this state. Or at least, the income from it does." I went still. "I am not ready to get married, Brandon." He moved so fast I didn't see him coming. He grabbed my jaw, his fingers digging into my cheeks, forcing me to look at him. His thumb pressed into the soft flesh under my chin. "You will be ready when I say you are ready," he hissed. "Stop acting like a child. You owe me." He held me there for 10 seconds. 10 seconds of pure terror where I could smell the whiskey on his breath and feel the lethal strength in his hands. Then he let go, shoving me backward against the sink. "Think about it," he said, "and wash these glasses properly. They were streaky last time." He walked away. I touched my face. My skin felt tender. I looked at my reflection in the dark window above the sink. There was a red mark fading on my jawline. Grandma Ruth had given me a key to freedom, but she had underestimated the cage. They weren't going to let me walk out the door. If I wanted to leave, I was going to have to fight my way out. And as I looked at the fading red mark, I realized that the fight was going to cost me more than just money. It was going to cost me blood. The war for my inheritance did not look like a battlefield with trenches and gunfire. It looked like a Sunday brunch. It looked like concern. It looked like love, twisted until it became a garrote. The strategy shifted about 3 weeks after the letter from Grandma Ruth arrived. My family realized that bullying me wasn't working fast enough, so they pivoted to a weapon far more effective against a girl raised to be a pleaser: guilt. It started with my mother. We were sitting in her living room, the curtains drawn against the bright Colorado sun. She was lying on the chaise lounge, a damp cloth over her forehead, looking like a tragic heroine from a Victorian novel. "It is the stress, Laura," she whispered, her hand fluttering to her chest. "My heart just races at night. I lie awake thinking about Tyler, thinking about how hard he tries and how the world just keeps beating him down. And then I think about you, sitting on that mountain of gold, refusing to throw down a rope." She let out a ragged breath, performing the role of the martyr with Oscar-worthy commitment. "I am not refusing to help, Mom," I said, sitting on the edge of the coffee table. I have to follow the rules of the trust." "Rules," she scoffed, weaky. "Family is the only rule that matters. If your grandmother were here, she would be heartbroken to see you hoarding this. She loved Tyler." She didn't mention that Grandma Ruth had explicitly called Tyler a leech in her final years. She just closed her eyes and let a single tear track through her powder. "I just hope my heart can take it. If anything happens to me, Laura, I want you to know I forgive you for choosing money over your mother." It was a masterclass in manipulation. I left the house feeling like a murderer. Then came my father. His approach was different. He didn't use emotion. He used a suffocating, patronizing benevolence. He cornered me in the kitchen while I was trying to leave, pouring me a glass of iced tea I didn't want. "Laura, honey," he said, leaning against the counter, crossing his arms. "I am worried about you. You are a sweet girl. You always have been. But you are soft. You trust people too easily." I almost laughed. I trusted them, and that was the problem. "I am fine, Dad," I said, clutching my car keys. "Are you?" He shook his head sadly. $750,000 is a lot of responsibility. There are sharks out there, Laura, scammers, people who will tell you whatever you want to hear just to get a signature. You don't have the head for high finance. You are an artist, remember? You are emotional." He took a sip of his tea, watching me over the rim of the glass. "Here is what we should do," he continued, his voice low and confidential. "You sign a power of attorney, just for the financial management. I will move the funds into a diversified portfolio under my name, just for safekeeping. Of course, I will give you a stipend. That way, you don't have to worry about the math, and you can focus on whatever it is you do at the studio." "I am a producer, Dad," I said, my voice tight. Sure, he waved a hand. "But let the men handle the heavy lifting. You are a target walking around with that much liquidity. Let me protect you." When I refused, politely but firmly, the mask of benevolence slipped for a fraction of a second, revealing a flash of cold anger. "You are making a mistake, Laura. When you lose it all, don't come crying to me." And then there was Tyler. Tyler didn't bother with manipulation or protection. He went straight for humiliation. At the studio, he would walk past my desk when I was on the phone with clients, speaking just loud enough for me to hear. "Must be nice," he would sneer to the interns. "Some people work for a living. Some people just wait for old ladies to die." He sent me articles about lottery winners who went bankrupt. He made jokes at staff meetings about rich girls who played at having careers. "Laura doesn't need this projected outcome," he said once during a budget review, throwing his pen on the table. "She is sitting on a trust fund. She doesn't understand the hunger of a man who actually has to build his own legacy." It was a three-pronged attack designed to erode my confidence, to make me feel isolated, stupid, and cruel. And it was working. I started to doubt myself. Maybe I was being selfish. Maybe I was incapable of managing the money. But the real danger wasn't my family. It was Brandon. Brandon's control, which had once been a velvet rope, turned into razor wire. It started with my appearance. "You are not wearing that to the gala." he said one evening, standing in the doorway of our closet, eyeing the sleeveless black dress I had chosen. "Why not?" I asked. "I wore this last year. You said you loved it." "That was before," he said. "Now you represent the brand, and the brand is class. That looks cheap. It looks like you are trying too hard to get attention." He walked in, flipped through the rack of clothes, and pulled out a high-necked, long-sleeved navy dress that made me look like a schoolmarm. "Wear this. It is dignified. Stop trying to show off your skin to every investor in the room." I put on the navy dress. I told myself he was just stressed about the company's image. Then he started policing my voice. "Let me do the talking today," he told me before a pitch meeting with a new sponsor. "You tend to ramble. It makes us look unprofessional. Just sit there, take notes, and nod. Smile. You are prettier when you smile." So I sat. I took notes. I smiled until my face ached. I became a decorative object in the company I helped build. The violence did not arrive with a bang. It crept in, disguised as passion, disguised as frustration. The first time it happened, we were in the home office. It was late, past 11 at night. Brandon had been drinking whiskey for 3 hours. He slid a document across the mahogany desk toward me. "Just sign it, Laura," he said, his voice slurred but dangerous. "It is a loan agreement. I am borrowing against your trust. The studio needs cash flow for the Q3 expansion. I will pay you back with interest. It is a formality." I looked at the paper. It wasn't a loan. It was a transfer authorization. If I signed it, I was giving him access to $200,000. No strings attached. "I can't," I said, pushing the paper back. "Mr. Holloway said—" "I don't care what the fossil said." Brandon slammed his hand on the desk. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. "I am your partner. I am the one who feeds you. I am the one who gave you a life." I stood up, my heart hammering. "I am going to bed." I turned to walk away. I made it 2 steps before he caught me. His hand clamped around my wrist. It wasn't a hold. It was a crush. His fingers were like steel bands, digging into the tender skin between the bones of my forearm. He yanked me back so hard I stumbled and nearly fell, my hip colliding with the edge of the desk. "Don't you walk away from me when I'm talking to you," he shouted, his face inches from mine. "Brandon, you're hurting me," I gasped, trying to pry his fingers loose. He looked at my wrist, then at my face. For a second, his eyes were black holes. Then, he let go. I pulled my arm to my chest, rubbing the skin. It was already turning red. Brandon blinked, as if waking up from a trance. His face crumbled. "Oh my God. Laura, I am so sorry." He reached for me, but I flinched. "I didn't mean to," he stammered, his voice breaking. I snapped. "The stress, the investors, your brother. It is too much. I would never hurt you. You know that, right? I love you. You make me so crazy when you walk away. You make me crazy." I absorbed the blame. It was my fault. I had provoked him. I had walked away. I forgave him. The next morning, I wore a long-sleeved blouse to work. Under the silk cuff, my wrist was ringed with 5 distinct purple bruises. That was the beginning of the pattern. It became a transaction of pain. Every time I said no, I paid a physical tax. 2 weeks later, he cornered me in the laundry room because I hadn't transferred money to pay off his credit card bill. He grabbed my upper arms and shook me until my teeth rattled. "Why are you so difficult?" he screamed. "Why do you hate me?" The bruises on my biceps were easy to hide with blazers. Then came the incident that changed everything. It was a Wednesday night. We were arguing about the engagement party, the televised event that was supposed to launch us as the power couple of Denver. Brandon wanted me to announce, live on air, that I was investing the entirety of the trust fund into Nova Spark as a symbol of our union. "I won't do it, Brandon," I said, standing by the kitchen island. "I am not signing the money over, not for an engagement stunt." "It is not a stunt," he roared. "It is a strategy. It shows confidence. It shows unity." It shows that you are using me, I shouted back. It was the first time I had raised my voice in months. The air in the room stopped. Brandon went very, very quiet. He walked over to me. He didn't run. He walked with a terrifying, deliberate slowness. "Using you?" he whispered. He reached out. This time, he didn't grab my wrist. He grabbed my face. His right hand clamped over my jaw, his thumb digging into one cheek, his fingers crushing the other. He squeezed. The pain was blinding. I felt my teeth grinding together, felt the pressure on my jawbone threatening to snap it. He forced my head back, exposing my throat. "You are nothing without me," he hissed, his spit landing on my face. "You are a little girl playing dress-up. If I didn't hold you up, you would be nothing but a suburban nobody. You will do what I say. Do you understand?" I couldn't speak. He was crushing my jaw. I could only whimper. He held me there for what felt like an eternity, his thumb pressing harder and harder until black spots danced in my vision. Then, he shoved me away. I fell back against the refrigerator, gasping for air, clutching my face. He stood there, panting, adjusting his cufflinks. "Look what you made me do," he said, shaking his head with disgust. "Go fix your face. You look a mess." He walked out. He went to the guest room to sleep. I went to the bathroom and locked the door. I looked in the mirror. My face was a ruin, but the real damage was lower, where his thumb had slipped and dug in. Right under the curve of my jawline, a deep, dark welt was already forming. On the other side of my neck, where his fingers had gripped for leverage, there were 4 distinct oval marks. I cried silently, putting a cold washcloth to my skin. I slept in the bathtub that night, afraid that the lock on the door wasn't strong enough. The next morning, the apology was extravagant. Flowers, breakfast in bed, tears. He cried more than I did. He told me he was a monster. He told me he would go to therapy. He told me he just loved me too much. And I learned the art of concealment. I went to a theatrical supply store 3 towns over. I bought a palette of concealers, green to cancel out the red, yellow to cancel out the purple. I watched tutorials on YouTube about how to cover tattoos. For weeks, I lived in turtlenecks and scarves. I became an expert at lighting. I avoided eye contact. I avoided my mother, who would have only told me to be more understanding. I avoided Tyler, who would have laughed. But you can't hide from the lights of a makeup mirror. The day of the big live stream, the day of the proposal, I sat in Maya's chair at Nova Spark. I had applied the concealer perfectly. I had checked it in the bathroom. I thought I was safe. But I had forgotten about the texture. I had forgotten that swelling has a shadow. When Maya tilted my head back to blend the foundation, her hand brushed against the lump on my jaw. She paused. She frowned. And in the reflection of that mirror, I saw the exact moment she realized that the perfect life of Laura Chang was painted over a canvas of bruises. I saw her eyes widen behind her glasses. I saw her look at the door where Brandon was laughing. And for the first time in months, I didn't see judgment. I didn't see greed. I saw horror. And in her horror, I finally found the permission to be afraid. The silence in the makeup room that day was different. It was not the empty silence of a room waiting to be filled. Nor was it the comfortable silence of routine. It was the silence of a dam holding back a catastrophic volume of water. Maya had seen the marks. She had looked behind the curtain of foundation and concealer, and unlike everyone else in my life, unlike my mother, who looked away, or my father, who lectured me on obedience, she had not blinked. She set the blending sponge down on the metal tray. The sound was a sharp clink that made me flinch. "Does he tell you it is your fault?" she asked. Her voice was quiet, barely a whisper, but it hit me with the force of a physical blow. I stared at my reflection in the lighted mirror. The woman looking back at me seemed terrified, her eyes wide and wet. I opened my mouth to recite the script, the one about stress, about clumsy accidents, about how much pressure Brandon was under, but the words died on my tongue. I started. but my throat closed up. Maya turned the chair so I was facing her, not the mirror. She put her hands on her knees, leaning in so our faces were level. She did not touch me. She knew, instinctively. That touch was dangerous territory for me right now. Does he tell you that if you were just better, smarter, or quieter, he wouldn't have to do it? She asked again. The accuracy of her words tore through me. It was exactly what Brandon said. Look what you made me do. If you had just signed the papers, if you hadn't argued. I nodded. It was a tiny movement, barely a tremor of my head, but it was the first honest thing I had done in months. The tears came then. They didn't come with sobbing or gasping. They just spilled over, hot and fast, ruining the makeup Maya had just spent 30 minutes applying. I sat there, paralyzed, letting the saltwater track through the layers of beige camouflage. Maya handed me a tissue. She waited until I had wiped my eyes. Then she asked the question that would change the trajectory of my life. Laura, she said, her eyes locked on mine behind her black-rimmed glasses. Do you want to cover it? Or do you want to end it? I looked at her. For 10 years, my goal had been to endure. I thought endurance was a virtue. I thought taking the pain without complaining made me strong, made me the good partner, the sensible daughter. But looking at Maya, I realized that endurance was just a slow way of dying. I don't know how to end it, I whispered. He owns everything, the studio, the contracts. My family is on his side. He doesn't own the truth, Maya said. She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out her phone. And he doesn't own the law. But to use the law, you need proof. You need to stop being a victim and start being a witness. She made me take out my phone. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped it. Take a picture, she commanded. Right now, before I fix it. I hesitated. Taking a picture felt like a betrayal. It felt like I was plotting against him. Do it, Maya said fiercely. I lifted the phone. I turned the camera on myself. The image on the screen was gruesome. The purple and yellow splotches on my jaw, the fingerprints on my neck. I snapped the photo, then another, then a close-up. Good, Maya said. Now, send them to a secure email, not your work email, not the one he has the password to. Do you have a secret account? No, I said. Make one, she said. Right now, while I fix your face. That afternoon, under the guise of a touch-up session, Maya did more than just repair my makeup. She repaired my spine. She told me to meet her in the break room on the 4th floor at 2 p.m. It was the floor where the HR department was housed, a restricted access zone that Brandon rarely visited because he considered administrative work beneath him. I walked into the break room at 2 o'clock exactly. My heart was hammering a rhythm of pure panic against my ribs. If Brandon saw me here, if he checked the security logs, if Tyler walked by. Maya was there, standing next to a woman I had seen in passing but never spoken to. Jenna. She was the head of human resources for Nova Spark, a woman with a sharp bob cut and eyes that missed nothing. I froze in the doorway. HR works for the company, I whispered to Maya, terrified. They work for him. Jenna stepped forward. She closed the break room door and locked it. I work for the corporation. Laura, Jenna said, her voice low and professional. And the corporation has liabilities. Mr. Cole is the founder. Yes, but Nova Spark has investors. We have insurance policies. And we have a strict zero-tolerance policy regarding workplace violence and domestic abuse that impacts the studio's liability. She pulled a folder from her bag and laid it on the laminate table. Maya told me what she saw, Jenna said. I cannot act on hearsay, and I cannot protect you if you remain silent. But if you give me documentation, if you create a paper trail, I can build a firewall around you. He will fire me, I said. He will destroy me. He can try, Jenna said, but retaliation against a whistleblower or a victim of abuse who reports it is a federal offense. It is also a violation of the morality clauses in our investor contracts. If Brandon Cole is assaulting an employee, and you are an employee, Laura, he is putting the entire company at risk. The board will not like that. I looked at Jenna. I had always thought of HR as the enemy, the people who enforced Brandon's rules, but I realized then that rules could cut both ways. Brandon's arrogance was his weakness. He thought he was the king, but he was actually just a CEO subject to bylaws. "What do I do?" I asked. "Document everything," Jenna instructed. "I want dates, I want times, I want photos, and I want you to start a digital trail of the financial coercion." "You mentioned he is forcing you to sign over a trust fund?" I nodded. "Send an email," Jenna said. "Send it to his work address. Make it sound professional. Dear Brandon, regarding the request to transfer funds from my personal trust to the corporate account, I am declining based on legal advice. Make him reply. Make him put his pressure in writing." "He will scream at me," I said. "Let him scream," Jenna said, "but make him write it down. If he threatens your job because you won't give him money, that is extortion. That is actionable." Leaving that room felt like walking out of a bunker and back into a war zone. But I had a mission now. I wasn't just surviving, I was gathering intelligence. The next step was the money. I waited until Brandon was in a recording session for his podcast. The red on-air light was glowing above the studio door, which meant I had exactly 60 minutes of guaranteed privacy. I went out to my car and drove to a bank 3 miles away, a small credit union that had no affiliation with the major banks Brandon used. I sat in the cubicle with a loan officer, a nice woman named Sarah who offered me a lollipop. "I need to open a checking account," I told her. "In my name only, with paperless statements, no mail to my house, everything must be online." "We can do that," she smiled. I deposited $20. It was a pathetic amount compared to the millions moving through Nova Spark, but it was the first $20 I had owned in 3 years. Then I called Mr. Holloway. I sat in my car in the bank parking lot, the doors locked, watching the rearview mirror for Brandon's Land Rover. Even though I knew he was miles away, paranoia had become my constant companion. "Mr. Holloway," I said when he answered. "It is Laura." "Laura." The old lawyer's voice was warm. "I have been waiting for your call." "I need you to look at the trust documents again," I said. "Specifically the clauses about financial coercion. Is there a way? Is there a way to trigger a protective lock? So that even if I sign something, even if he forces my hand physically, the bank will reject it?" "Ah," Mr. Holloway said. The line went silent for a moment. "You are in trouble, aren't you, child?" "I need a failsafe," I said, my voice shaking. "I need to know that if he makes me sign a contract tonight, it will be worthless tomorrow." "It is called a duress clause," Mr. Holloway said. "We can file an amendment to the trust. We can state that any transfer request exceeding a certain amount, say $10,000, requires a dual signature from me, your trustee, and a notarized affidavit of independent counsel. If he forces you to sign a transfer, the bank will flag it immediately because it lacks my signature. It will bounce." "Do it," I said. "Please, do it today." "I will file it within the hour," he promised. "Stay safe, Laura." I drove back to the studio, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. I felt like a spy in my own life. Every text message I sent, every email I drafted, every photo I took was a breadcrumb leading toward an exit I wasn't sure I could reach. When I walked back into the Nova Spark lobby, Brandon was there. He was standing by the reception desk, talking to Tyler. As I pushed through the glass doors, they both stopped talking. They turned to look at me. The air in the lobby felt thin. "Where have you been?" Brandon asked. His tone was casual, but his eyes were drilling into me. He was scanning my face, my body language, looking for a crack. "I just went to get coffee," I said, lifting the cup I had bought as a prop. "The machine in the break room is broken." "You were gone a long time for coffee," Tyler sneered. "We needed you to review the sponsorship deck." "There was a line," I said, walking past them toward the elevators. My legs felt like lead. I could feel Brandon's eyes on my back. He was in Predator. He could smell fear. He could smell change. He knew something was different, even if he couldn't name it. "Laura," Brandon called out. I stopped. I didn't turn around. Come to my office, he said. We need to talk about the engagement party and the investment. I will be there in 5 minutes, I said. I need to use the restroom. I stepped into the elevator and hit the button. As the doors closed, cutting off his view of me, I slumped against the metal wall, exhaling a breath I felt like I had been holding for hours. I went to my office, my glass-walled cage. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. I logged into the secret email account I had created on Maya's advice, laurafree2025@gmail.com. I opened the sent folder. There they were, the photos. The close-up of the bruise on my jaw, the finger marks on my arm from last week, the welt on my shin from where he had kicked me under the table. Seeing them on the high-definition screen was different than seeing them in the mirror. In the mirror, they were part of me, on the screen. They were evidence. They were data. They were undeniable proof that the man everyone called a visionary was a monster. I looked at the inbox. There was one new email. From Jenna, HR Confidential. Subject, documentation received. Laura, I have received the files. They are encrypted on the secure server. You have started the process. You are not alone in this. We are ready when you are. I stared at those words. You are not alone. For 10 years, isolation had been his greatest weapon. He had isolated me from my friends, from my art, and turned my own family into his enforcers. He had made me believe that I was a singular, broken thing that only he could fix. But as I looked at that email, a small, fierce flame ignited in the center of my chest. It wasn't hope, exactly. It was something colder. It was calculation. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a producer. And for the first time in my life, I was producing my own story. I closed the laptop. I checked my makeup in the reflection of the black screen. The bruises were covered. The mask was in place. But behind the mask, the eyes were different. They weren't the eyes of the girl who cleaned the grout. They were the eyes of a woman who had just realized that she held the detonator. I stood up, smoothed my skirt, and walked out to face him. The invitation was printed on cardstock so thick it felt like a weapon in my hand. It was cream-colored with gold leaf lettering that swirled aggressively across the page. The future of Nova Spark, a celebration of love and legacy. It was marketed as an engagement party. It was staged like a corporate merger, and in reality, it was a hostage negotiation. The venue was the clubhouse of the Sapphire Hills Country Club, a sprawling pseudo-Tuscan villa overlooking the 18th hole. My parents had insisted on this location. It was the kind of place they had always wanted to belong to, but could never afford, a place where the air smelled of cut grass and old money. Tonight, Brandon had rented out the entire ballroom. I stood in the foyer of the clubhouse, clutching my clutch bag so tightly that my fingers were cramping. Inside that bag, sandwiched between a compact mirror and a tube of lipstick, was a manila folder. It was thin, but it felt heavier than a lead brick. It contained the weapon Maya and Jenna had helped me forge, the email logs, the photos of my injuries, and the affidavit from Mr. Holloway. But before the war could start, I had to endure the pageant. The strategy my family had employed for this event was breathtaking in its audacity. 2 days ago, an email had gone out to the entire guest list: investors, local politicians, media partners, and friends. We are thrilled to announce that alongside their personal union, Laura Chang has formally agreed to become the lead angel investor for Nova Spark's Phase 2 expansion. Her dedicated trust fund will be the cornerstone of our new studio build-out. I had read that email on my phone in the bathroom at work, feeling the blood drain from my face. I had not agreed. I had not signed a single piece of paper. They had simply announced it as a fait accompli, banking on the fact that I was too polite, too easy, to humiliate them by correcting the record in public. It was a trap constructed of social pressure. If I said no now, I wasn't just refusing a business deal. I was ruining a celebration. I was making my brother look like a liar. I was emasculating my fiancé. I walked into the ballroom. The noise hit me first. A wall of chatter and clinking glass. Then the visual. It was opulent to the point of nausea. There were centerpieces of white orchids that probably cost more than my first car. There was a projection screen behind the stage displaying a slideshow of Brandon and me. Brandon looking visionary, me looking adoring, Brandon pointing at a blueprint, me nodding. There she is, the woman of the hour. Tyler's voice cut through the ambient jazz. He was standing by the open bar, holding a tumbler of scotch, surrounded by a group of men in expensive suits. These were the investors he had been courting. The hard money guys from downtown who didn't care about ethics, only returns. Tyler strode over to me, his face flushed with alcohol and triumph. He didn't hug me. He clapped a heavy hand on my shoulder. We were just talking about the Aurora project. Laura, he boomed, making sure everyone within a 20-foot radius could hear. I told Gary here that once your capital hits the account on Monday, we are breaking ground immediately. That trust fund is going to turn into a gold mine. Right, sis? He squeezed my shoulder. I flinched, not because of his grip, but because of what lay beneath the silk of my dress on that specific shoulder. The bruise was fresh. It was less than 24 hours old. The memory of how I got it flashed in my mind, overlaying the golden light of the ballroom with the harsh, cold shadows of our apartment the night before. It had been the final ultimatum. Brandon had come home late, smelling of stress and ozone. He had thrown a leather portfolio onto the kitchen island. Sign it, he had said. No hello, no kiss, just the command. I had looked at the document. It was a gift deed. It wasn't even a loan anymore. It was a legal instrument transferring the entirety of Grandma Ruth's trust to the joint marital assets of Brandon Cole and Laura Chang, effective immediately upon signature. I can't, I had said, standing by the sink, gripping the edge of the granite. Mr. Holloway says, "Stop hiding behind the lawyer," Brandon had screamed. The sudden explosion of noise made me jump. This isn't about the lawyer. This is about you. You are embarrassing me. Laura, I have told everyone the money is coming. If you don't sign this, I look like a fraud. That is not my fault, I had whispered. You shouldn't have promised money you didn't have. That was the trigger. He crossed the kitchen in 2 strides. He didn't strike me. He didn't punch me. That would leave a mark on my face, and he needed my face for the cameras. Instead, he shoved me. It was a violent, 2-handed push against my chest. I flew backward. My shoulder slammed into the solid oak doorframe of the pantry. The pain was immediate and sickening. A sharp crack that radiated down my arm and up into my neck. I crumpled to the floor, gasping, clutching my arm. Brandon stood over me, his chest heaving. For a second, he looked like he wanted to kick me. Then, the mask slammed back down. "Look what you made me do," he spat. "You make me so crazy. Why do you have to be so stubborn? Just sign the paper. Laura, stop hurting us." He walked out, leaving me sobbing on the cold tile. I didn't call the police then. I called my mother. I was still desperate for a savior, still hoping that the woman who gave birth to me would choose me over the illusion of success. I told her everything through tears. I told her he shoved me. I told her my shoulder was throbbing. I told her I was scared. There was a silence on the line. Then, my mother sighed. "Oh, Laura," she said, her voice dripping with disappointment. "Why do you have to provoke him? You know how much stress he is under with this launch. Men get emotional when their honor is on the line. You probably made him feel small. Just put some ice on it and apologize. Don't ruin tomorrow. Tyler needs this. Tyler needs this." That was the moment the last thread of loyalty snapped. I hung up the phone. I didn't put ice on it. I walked to the bathroom, took off my shirt, and took 3 high-resolution photos of the swelling purple hematoma forming on my deltoid. Then I emailed them to Jenna. Subject: Incident Report, October 24th. Attachment: Injury shoulder, JPG. Note: Coercion attempted via physical force. Document attached. 10 minutes later, Jenna replied, "Received. The file is ready. The restraining order is drafted. We have enough to trigger the emergency clause in the trust. Do not sign anything. We are ready to move when you are." Back in the ballroom, Tyler was still squeezing my injured shoulder. "You are quiet tonight," Tyler laughed, shaking me a little. "Cat got your tongue? Or just overwhelmed by how rich we are going to be?" "I am just tired, Tyler," I said, carefully stepping out from under his hand. "It has been a long week." "Well, wake up," he snapped, his smile failing to reach his eyes. "Brandon is going to make the announcement in 20 minutes. He is going to call you up on stage. You need to look enthusiastic, none of this mousy, woe-is-me act." I looked at my brother. I looked at his expensive suit, bought with money he borrowed from me. I looked at the investors he was trying to con, and I felt a strange, cold clarity. "Don't worry," I said softly. "I will be ready." I walked away from him, navigating the sea of bodies. I saw my parents holding court at a table near the front. My mother was wearing a silver gown, looking radiant. My father was smoking a cigar on the terrace, laughing with the mayor. They looked like royalty. They looked like they belonged. They had sold me to buy this feeling. I made my way toward the back of the clubhouse, toward the heavy double doors that led to the dressing rooms and the makeup area. I needed to get away from the noise. I needed to prepare. As I walked down the corridor, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Mr. Holloway. "The papers are filed. The duress clause is active. If you sign anything tonight, it is legally void. But Laura, be careful. When a cornered animal realizes the cage is locked, it bites." I put the phone away. The corridor was quiet. I could hear the muffled thump of the bass from the ballroom, but out here, the air was cool and still. I stopped in front of a large gilt mirror hanging in the hallway. I looked at myself. The navy dress Brandon had forced me to wear was modest, high-necked, covering everything. It covered the fingerprints on my neck. It covered the bruise on my shoulder. It covered the scars on my soul. But it had pockets. I reached into the clutch and transferred the folded documents into the deep, hidden pocket of the dress. I wanted them against my body. I wanted to feel the sharp edges of the paper. Suddenly, the door at the end of the hall opened. Brandon stepped out. He was wearing a tuxedo. He looked devastatingly handsome. The kind of handsome that made magazines put him on the cover. He stopped when he saw me. He walked down the hall, his shoes clicking on the marble floor. He didn't look angry. He looked excited. He looked like a man who had already won. "There you are," he said, reaching out to stroke my cheek. I forced myself not to recoil. "I was looking for you. It is almost time." "Time for what?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "The proposal," he whispered, leaning in to kiss my forehead. "And the announcement. I have the contract in my jacket pocket. We can sign it right there on stage. After you say yes, it will be the ultimate gesture of faith. The crowd will go wild." He pulled back and looked me in the eyes. His pupils were blown wide with adrenaline. "You are going to do this for me, right, Laura?" he asked. It wasn't a question. It was a threat wrapped in a smile. "You are going to be a good girl." I felt the bruise on my shoulder throb in time with my heartbeat. I felt the weight of the papers in my pocket. I thought about Maya waiting in the makeup room. I thought about Jenna waiting by the phone. I thought about Grandma Ruth. "I am going to do exactly what needs to be done," I said. Brandon smiled, satisfied. He didn't hear the difference in my tone. He only heard compliance because that was all he had ever heard from me. "That is my girl," he said. "Go get touched up. Maya is waiting in the green room. Make sure you look perfect. No flaws tonight." "No flaws," I repeated. He turned and walked back toward the ballroom, toward the lights and the applause. I watched him go. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of expensive perfume and stale fear. Then I turned and opened the door to the makeup room. Maya was there, setting up her station. She looked up when I entered. She saw the set of my jaw. She saw the darkness in my eyes. She didn't smile. She just nodded. "Are you ready?" she asked. I walked over to the chair and sat down. I reached into my pocket and touched the papers one last time. "I am not just ready," I said, staring at my reflection. "I am done hiding." The countdown was about to begin, but this time, I wasn't waiting for the explosion. I was the one lighting the fuse. The dressing room inside the Sapphire Hills Country Club was designed to make people feel like royalty, but as I stepped inside and locked the door behind me, it felt more like a holding cell lined with velvet. The air was thick with the scent of lilies and hairspray. Outside, the muffled roar of 300 guests drinking champagne and speculating about my net worth vibrated through the floorboards. But in here, the silence was absolute. Maya was already waiting. She had set up her station on the antique vanity, a row of brushes laid out like surgical instruments, a palette of concealers that ranged from pale ivory to deep espresso, and a ring light that cast a clinical, unforgiving halo against the dim mood lighting of the room. She did not smile when I entered. She did not offer the usual platitudes about how beautiful the evening was, or how lucky I was. She just watched me in the mirror as I walked toward her. I was shivering. It was 70 degrees in the room, but the cold was coming from inside my bones. "Sit down," Maya said softly. I sank into the chair. My legs felt like they were made of water. I looked at myself in the glass. The navy blue dress was high-necked and demure, perfect for the role of the dutiful, conservative investor wife they wanted me to play. But under the heavy silk, my body was screaming. "We need to check the coverage on your neck," Maya said, reaching for a bottle of setting spray. "And I need to fix your lip. You have chewed all the color off." "I am fine," I said, my voice sounding brittle. "Just a quick touch-up." "Take off the bolero, Laura," Maya said. I froze. The little cropped jacket I wore over the dress was my armor. It covered my shoulders. It covered the upper arms. "I am cold," I lied. "Take it off," Maya repeated. Her voice was not commanding this time. It was pleading. "I need to blend the foundation down to the décolletage. If you sweat under the lights, the makeup line will show. You know the drill." I knew the drill. I had known the drill for 10 years. Conceal, blend, set, deny. Slowly, with fingers that felt numb, I unbuttoned the jacket. I slid it off my shoulders. Wincing as the fabric dragged over my left side, I let it fall to the floor. Maya gasped. It was a sharp intake of breath that sucked the oxygen out of the room. The bruise on my left shoulder, the result of Brandon shoving me into the pantry doorframe 24 hours ago, had bloomed into something terrifying. It was no longer just a red welt. It was a deep, mottled galaxy of black, purple, and sick yellow that spread from my collarbone down to my bicep. It looked angry. It looked undeniable. I tried to pull the strap of my dress up to hide it, but the strap was too thin. There was no hiding this. "Laura," Maya whispered, bringing her hand to her mouth. She stepped closer, her eyes scanning the damage with a professional's assessment that quickly crumbled into human horror. "This is fresh." "I fell," I said automatically. The lie came out before I could stop it. A reflex honed by a decade of practice. I tripped over the rug in the hallway and hit the side table. "It looks worse than it feels." Maya looked at me. She didn't blink. She reached out and gently touched the skin just above the bruise, where the swelling was raising the flesh. "Stop it," she said. "It was an accident," I insisted, though my voice was shaking so hard the words were barely intelligible. "I am just clumsy. You know I am clumsy." "This isn't a cabinet, Laura," Maya said, her voice cutting through my panic like a scalpel. "And this isn't a rug, and that mark on your neck from last week wasn't a fall." She grabbed a makeup wipe, but she didn't use it. She just held it, her knuckles white. "This is a shove," she said, mapping the trauma with her eyes. "He pushed you, hard, into something solid." I looked down at my lap, unable to meet her gaze. The shame was hot and suffocating. "I provoked him," I whispered. "I wouldn't sign the papers. I made him mad." "No," Maya said firmly. She crouched down so she was in my eye line, forcing me to look at her. "He made a choice. You did not make him hit you. You did not make him shove you. That is a lie he tells you so he can sleep at night. Don't you dare tell it to yourself." I felt the tears pricking my eyes again. "I can't do this. Maya, everyone is out there. My parents, the investors. If I ruin this, he will destroy me. He said he would ruin my reputation. He said he would make sure I never work in this town again. He is already destroying you, Maya said. Look at your shoulder. Look at your neck. What is next? A broken arm? A brain bleed? She stood up and turned back to her station. She picked up a heavy pot of full-coverage concealer, the industrial strength kind used for film sets. She loaded a brush with green color corrector. I can cover this, she said, her voice flat. I can paint over it. I can make you look like a porcelain doll. You can go out there, smile, sign his contract, and give him your grandmother's money. And then you can go home with him. She paused, holding the brush in midair. Or, she said, turning to look at me, we can stop lying. My heart hammered against my ribs. What do you mean? Maya looked at the door, ensuring it was locked. Then she looked back at me. I am going to put foundation on it, but I am not going to set it. I am not going to use the color corrector. I am going to leave it visible, just under the surface, like a shadow. If the light hits it, people will see. If he touches you, the makeup will shift. He will kill me, I whispered. No, Maya said. He won't touch you, not with 5 cameras live streaming and 300 witnesses. The light is your protection, Laura, but you have to let the light in. Before I could answer, the handle of the dressing room door jiggled. Then came a sharp, impatient knock. Laura, are you in there? It was Brandon. The sound of his voice triggered a physical response in me. My stomach clenched. My breath hitched. Maya immediately spun around, blocking me from view with her body, while she motioned for me to pull the dress strap up. Just a minute, Mr. Cole, Maya called out, her voice professional and calm. We are just finishing the setting powder. Open the door, Brandon ordered. Now. Maya looked at me. Her eyes were asking a question. Are you ready? I took a deep breath. I nodded. Maya unlocked the door. Brandon swept into the room like a storm front. He was manic with energy. His tuxedo was sharp, his hair perfect, his smile plastered on like a decal. He smelled of expensive scotch and adrenaline. What is taking so long? He demanded, looking from Maya to me. The pre-show is wrapping up. Tyler is stalling the investors, but I need you on deck. He walked over to me, examining Maya's work. He peered at my face, checking for flaws. You look pale, he criticized. Put more blush on her. She looks like a corpse. It is the lighting in here, Maya said, picking up a brush. She will look radiant on stage. Brandon leaned against the vanity, crossing his arms. He was too close. He was invading my space, sucking the air out of the room. He looked at my bare shoulders. Why is your jacket off? He asked. I was blending the neck, Maya said quickly. Brandon reached out, his hand, the hand that had shoved me, the hand that had squeezed my jaw, the hand that wore the platinum engagement ring I had bought, landed heavily on my left shoulder, right on the bruise. I gasped. The pain was immediate, a sharp, electric jolt that shot down my arm. It took every ounce of my willpower not to scream. You are tense, Brandon said. He didn't lift his hand. Instead, he squeezed. He dug his fingers into the tender, battered flesh. It wasn't a caress. It was a warning. He was pressing on the injury he had created, reminding me of its existence, reminding me of his power. You are not going to embarrass me out there, are you? He whispered, leaning down so his lips brushed my ear. To anyone watching, it looked like an intimate moment between lovers. To me, it was torture. No, I managed to choke out. I won't. Good, he said. He squeezed harder, his thumb grinding into the center of the hematoma. I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted copper blood. Because that trust fund is the only reason half those people are here. You are the golden goose, Laura. Don't forget that. He let go. I slumped slightly in the chair, black spots dancing in my vision. 5 minutes, Brandon said, checking his watch. Put the jacket back on. Cover up. You shouldn't be showing this much skin anyway. It is vulgar. He turned and walked out, leaving the door open. As soon as he was gone, Maya dropped the blush brush. She reached for her phone, which was propped up against the mirror, the screen facing out. She tapped the screen. The red timer stopped. "I got it," she whispered, her hands trembling slightly. "I got the audio. You are the golden goose," and I got him squeezing the shoulder. "I saw your face, Laura. The camera saw your face." She played it back. The audio was crystal clear. The sound of his threat, the wet sound of his lips near my ear, the sharp intake of my breath when he squeezed. "This goes to Jenna," Maya said, her fingers flying across the screen. "Right now." My phone buzzed in my lap. It was a text from Jenna. "Protection order is drafted and ready to be filed. Security is on standby at the exits. We just need the signal. You are safe. Laura, we have your back." I looked at the message. Then I looked at Maya. "Thank you," I said. Maya shook her head. "Don't thank me. Just survive this. Now, put the jacket on, but don't button it." "Why?" I asked. "Because," Maya said, looking at the bruise that was now throbbing with a fresh, angry heat, "when you get on that stage, when the moment is right, it needs to be easy to slip off." I stood up. I pulled the bolero jacket back on. It covered the mark. Once again, I looked perfect. I looked like the dutiful fiancé. I could hear the music swelling outside. The MC was warming up the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, in just a few moments, the future of media in Denver." I could hear my mother's voice in the hallway, shrill with excitement. "Oh yes, Laura is so thrilled to contribute. It is really a family legacy. We are so proud of her for finally stepping up." They were selling me. They were selling my trauma, my silence, and my future, wrapping it in a bow and calling it love. I looked in the mirror one last time. I saw the fear in my eyes. Yes, but beneath the fear, I saw something else. I saw the end. Maya walked me to the door. She didn't hug me. She knew I couldn't handle the pressure on my body, but she grabbed my hand and squeezed it hard. "You are not alone," she said. "Remember that. When you are up there, look at the camera. Look at me. We are witnesses." I nodded. I stepped out into the hallway. The bright lights of the ballroom spilled through the double doors at the end of the corridor. I could see Brandon waiting for me, smiling, holding a microphone. He looked like a god. But I knew the truth. He wasn't a god. He was just a man who hit women, and tonight, I was going to introduce him to the world. I walked toward the light. Every step sent a jolt of pain through my shoulder, keeping me focused, keeping me angry. "If I want to survive," I whispered to myself, the words barely audible over the applause that started to ripple through the crowd, "I have to let them see." I touched the pocket of my dress where the legal papers sat against my hip. I touched the unbuttoned edge of my jacket. I was ready. The ballroom of the Sapphire Hills Country Club had been transformed into a television set. That was the first thing I noticed as I walked through the double doors. The warm, intimate lighting of a typical engagement party was gone, replaced by the harsh, surgical glare of rig lights mounted on trusses above the crowd. 3 boom cameras swept over the heads of the 300 guests, their red tally lights glowing like predatory eyes. This was not a celebration of love. It was a product launch, and I was the product. I stood at the edge of the room, hidden for a moment in the shadows of the velvet drapes. I watched Brandon holding court on the raised stage at the front of the room. He was in his element. He held a microphone with the casual confidence of a talk show host, his tuxedo jacket unbuttoned just enough to look relaxed but wealthy. "We are building something more than a company," Brandon was saying. His voice amplified by the massive speakers, booming over the crowd. "We are building a legacy, and tonight, we are taking the biggest step yet." Applause rippled through the room. It was polite, expensive applause. To the right of the stage, my father was holding a glass of champagne, surrounded by a cluster of potential investors. He looked taller than I had seen him in years. His chest was puffed out, his face flushed with the intoxication of proximity to power. "Oh, it is a done deal," I heard him say to a man in a gray suit. Laura is fully committed. The entire trust fund is moving into the Phase 2 accounts on Monday morning. We are talking about $750,000 of liquid capital injection. My daughter knows a good investment when she sees one. He was selling me. He was selling my safety, my future, and my grandmother's final gift to buy himself a seat at the cool kids' table. I felt a cold hand squeeze my heart. The last lingering shred of guilt I had felt about what I was about to do evaporated. They had not just failed to protect me. They were actively profiting from my subjugation. I caught Maya's eye. She was standing in the shadows near the tech booth, her arms crossed, her face grim. She gave me a barely perceptible nod. Then she looked up at the camera operator on the jib, a guy she had worked with for 5 years, and tapped her watch. It was time. And now, Brandon announced, his voice dropping to a husky, emotional register that I knew he practiced in the mirror. I want to bring out the woman who makes it all possible, my partner, my muse, the heart of Nova Spark. Laura, come up here. The spotlight swung around, blindingly white. It found me instantly. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I just walked. I moved through the crowd, the sea of people parting for me. I could feel their eyes on my navy dress, on the little bolero jacket buttoned to my chin. I could hear the whispers. She looks so serious. Maybe she is nervous. I climbed the stairs to the stage. Brandon reached out his hand. I took it. His palm was sweaty. He pulled me into the center of the light. He squeezed my hand, a sharp, warning pressure that said, "Smile, or else." "You look beautiful," he said into the microphone, loud enough for the world to hear. Then, away from the mic, through his teeth, "Fix your face. You look like a funeral." I forced the corners of my mouth up. It felt like cracking plaster. Brandon turned to the camera. "Ladies and gentlemen, friends, family, and the thousands watching us live right now, I have a question to ask." The room went silent. The air conditioning hummed. Brandon dropped to one knee. A collective awe swept through the room. My mother, standing in the front row, brought a handkerchief to her eyes, sobbing on cue. Tyler was filming with his phone, grinning like he had just won the lottery. Brandon pulled a black velvet box from his pocket. He snapped it open. The diamond was huge, aggressive, and cold. "Laura Chang," Brandon said, looking up at me with eyes that shone with rehearsed adoration. "You have been my rock, my support. We have built an empire together, but I want to build a life. Will you marry me?" The silence stretched. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. It was the moment where I was supposed to cry, nod, and fall into his arms. It was the moment the contract was sealed. I reached out, but I didn't take the ring. I took the microphone from his other hand. Brandon blinked. This wasn't in the script. He started to stand up, a flicker of irritation crossing his face, but he masked it quickly with a chuckle. "She wants to make a speech, folks. She is stealing the show." The crowd laughed nervously. I gripped the microphone. My hands were shaking, but my voice, when it came out, was strangely steady. It sounded like a stranger's voice. "Before I answer," I said, my voice echoing off the high ceilings, "I need to tell you the truth." Brandon's smile faltered. He stood up fully now, towering over me. He reached for the mic. "Babe, we can do speeches later. The champagne is waiting." "No," I said. I stepped back, out of his reach. I looked directly into the lens of camera 2, the one Maya had signaled. "Everyone here thinks this is a celebration of a merger," I said. "My father told you I am investing my trust fund in Nova Spark. My brother told you I am a partner." "Laura!" my father shouted from the floor. "That is enough. She is overwhelmed. Cut the feed." "I am not overwhelmed," I said, my voice rising. "I am extorted." A murmur of confusion ran through the crowd. Brandon's face went deadly pale. He lunged for me, grabbing my upper arm. "Give me the mic," he hissed. "You are having a breakdown. We are going off air." "Maya!" I screamed. Maya, standing by the monitors, slammed her hand onto the desk of the technical director. "Keep rolling. Close up on camera 2, now." The camera zoomed in. I dropped my arm, breaking Brandon's grip. With my free hand, I reached up to the button of my bolero jacket. "You want to know why I agreed to give him the money?" I asked the camera. I undid the button. I shrugged the jacket off. It fell to the stage floor in a heap of blue silk. The gasps were audible. They started in the front row and rolled backward like a wave. Under the harsh, unforgiving studio lights, the makeup Maya had applied, the foundation she had deliberately not set, the concealer she had left thin, did exactly what she said it would do. It didn't hide the truth. It framed it. The bruise on my shoulder was a horrific landscape of black and purple, swelling angrily against the strap of my dress, and on my neck, where the sweat and heat had caused the foundation to separate. The finger marks were stark and undeniable. "Oh my God," someone in the crowd whispered. Brandon froze. He looked at the monitor. He saw what the world was seeing. "Laura," he stammered, holding his hands up. "Baby, you fell. Tell them you fell. You are clumsy. You told me you fell." "I didn't fall," I said into the microphone. "You shoved me into the pantry doorframe yesterday because I refused to sign over my grandmother's inheritance. And these marks on my neck?" I pointed to my throat. "These are from last week, when you pinned me against the sink because I didn't transfer money fast enough." "Liar," Brandon screamed. The charm was gone. The monster was out. "She is crazy. She is off her meds. Cut the feed." My mother was scrambling up the stairs to the stage. "Laura, stop it. Stop it right now. You are ruining everything." My father was right behind her. "Get the mic away from her." They were coming for me, my family. The people who were supposed to protect me were rushing the stage to silence me. Brandon grabbed the microphone from my hand and yanked it away. The feedback squealed, a high-pitched shriek that made everyone cover their ears. "Technical difficulties," Brandon yelled, his face red and sweating. "My fiancé is unwell. We need a doctor." He had the mic. He thought he had won. But I had prepared for this. I reached behind the podium, where Maya had taped a second, wireless lavalier microphone earlier that afternoon. I clipped it to my dress and flipped the switch. "I am not unwell," I shouted. The sound system popped, and my voice came back, louder and clearer than before. Brandon looked at me in shock. "And I am not your fiancé," I continued. "I am your victim, but I am not the only one." I pulled the manila envelope from the deep pocket of my dress. I held it up. "I have the emails," I said, my voice shaking with adrenaline. "I have the financial records showing you draining my accounts. I have the photos of every bruise for the last 6 months. And I have the recording from the dressing room 10 minutes ago where you threatened me." "Shut up!" Brandon roared. He didn't care about the cameras anymore. He cared about survival. He started toward me, his hands curled into fists. "Stay back," I warned. "Security!" Brandon yelled. "Get her off the stage." But security didn't come, or rather, they didn't come for me. From the side entrance of the ballroom, the double doors burst open, but it wasn't the club's private security. It was Jenna, and behind her were 2 uniformed police officers. Jenna walked straight to the edge of the stage. She held up a clipboard. "Mr. Cole," she announced, her voice projecting without a microphone. "I am Jenna Lewis, Head of Human Resources for Nova Spark. As of this moment, the board has been notified of a gross violation of the Conduct Clause. We have received verified evidence of assault and extortion." "You work for me!" Brandon screamed, pointing a shaking finger at her. "I will fire you! I will fire all of you!" "You don't have the authority," Jenna said calmly. "Not anymore." The police officers stepped onto the stage. The crowd was in chaos. People were filming with their phones. My parents had frozen halfway up the stairs, looking between me and the police, realizing with dawning horror that the ship was sinking and they were on it. Brandon looked at the cops. He looked at me. He looked at the ruin of his reputation broadcasting live to 50,000 people. And he snapped. He didn't run. He didn't surrender. He did exactly what an abuser does when he loses control. He tried to take it back by force. He lunged at me. "You bitch," he screamed. "You ungrateful little bitch." He grabbed my bruised shoulder. The pain was blinding, white-hot and instant. I screamed, the sound tearing through the microphone. He shook me, his fingers digging into the injury. "I made you. You are nothing without me." But this time, I didn't freeze. I didn't apologize. I looked him right in the eye, through the pain, through the fear. "I am everything without you," I said. Then the world turned into a blur of blue uniforms. "Let her go," a police officer shouted. 2 officers tackled Brandon. They slammed him to the floor of the stage. The microphone flew from his hand and rolled away, thumping rhythmically against the wood. "Get off me!" Brandon was howling, his face pressed against the stage. "Do you know who I am? I am Brandon Cole." "You are under arrest for assault," the officer said, clicking the handcuffs onto his wrists. The metallic sound was the sweetest music I had ever heard. I stood there, clutching my shoulder. The room was spinning. The flashbulbs were popping like strobe lights. My mother was at the bottom of the stairs, wailing. "Laura, look what you did. You destroyed the family." I looked down at her. I looked at my father, who was already on his phone, frantically trying to distance himself from the wreckage. I looked at Tyler, who was sneaking out the back exit. "No, Mom," I said, my voice quiet now, just for me. I saved myself. Maya ran onto the stage. She threw a shawl over my shoulders, covering the bruise, covering the exposure. She didn't say a word. She just put her arm around my waist and held me up. The live stream was still running. The red light on camera 2 was still glowing. I looked into the lens one last time. I didn't wipe the tears away. I didn't fix my hair. I let them see the mess. I let them see the truth. Then, Jenna signaled the booth. "Cut to black," she said. The red light went out, but the recording, the evidence, the truth, would live forever. The courtroom was a study in sterile geometry, sharp angles, polished wood, and a silence so profound it felt like the inside of a vacuum. It was the complete opposite of the chaotic, screaming spectacle at the country club 3 weeks ago. There were no flashing lights here, no champagne, no applause, just the cold, hard fluorescent hum of justice. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Mr. Holloway. My hands were folded in my lap. I was wearing a gray suit, tailored and sharp. No bolero jacket this time. The bruise on my shoulder had faded to a sickly yellow ghost, but I did not hide it. I let the collar of my blouse sit open enough that the edge of the injury was visible to anyone who cared to look. Across the aisle, Brandon sat with his defense team. He looked different, without the studio lighting, without the expensive tuxedo, without the aura of control he usually projected. He looked smaller. He looked like what he was, a man who had been caught. He refused to look at me. He spent the entire morning staring at a water pitcher on his table. His jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping. Behind him, in the public gallery, sat my parents and Tyler. They were huddled together like survivors of a shipwreck, pale and anxious. They were not looking at me with anger anymore. They were looking at me with fear. They knew that today, the bank of Laura Chang was officially closing. "The court will come to order," Judge Patterson said. She was a woman in her 60s with eyes that looked like they could cut glass. She shuffled the file in front of her. "We are here to address the petition for a permanent restraining order and the motion regarding the interference with the Ruth Miller Trust." The proceedings were brutal in their efficiency. Mr. Holloway stood up. He did not make a grand speech. He simply laid out the timeline. He projected the photos Jenna and I had compiled onto the screens mounted on the jury box. There it was, my pain, catalogued and dated, the purple welt on my jaw, the fingerprints on my neck, the galaxy of bruising on my shoulder. "The physical evidence is consistent with a pattern of escalating domestic violence," Mr. Holloway stated calmly, but the violence had a specific purpose. It was not just an expression of anger, it was an instrument of extortion. He introduced the gift deed into evidence, the contract Brandon had tried to force me to sign in the kitchen, the one that would have transferred my entire inheritance to him. Brandon's lawyer tried to object. Objection, Your Honor. This was a mutual business agreement between fiancés. Mr. Cole was merely facilitating an investment. Facilitating? Judge Patterson raised an eyebrow. Let us hear the facilitation. Mr. Holloway pressed a button. The audio recording from the dressing room played. The acoustics of the courtroom amplified every rustle, every breath. You are the golden goose. Laura, don't forget that. Then the wet sound of his lips near my ear. You are not going to embarrass me out there, are you? And then, the sound that made the stenographer flinch, the sharp intake of breath as he squeezed my bruised shoulder. The silence that followed was heavy. It was the sound of a lie dying. Brandon sank lower in his chair. He knew, everyone knew, there was no spinning this. There was no clumsy Laura narrative that could explain the menace in his voice. Mr. Holloway continued, Your Honor, the petitioner asserts that Mr. Cole, aided by the pressure from the petitioner's family, attempted to circumvent the protective clauses of the Ruth Miller Trust. They sought to bypass the spendthrift provisions through physical coercion. Judge Patterson turned her gaze to the gallery. She looked at my parents. My father shrank back. My mother looked down at her handbag. Tyler stared at the ceiling. The court takes a very dim view of financial abuse, Judge Patterson said, her voice like ice water, especially when it is disguised as familial duty. She turned back to Brandon. Mr. Cole, your defense claims that Ms. Chang was a willing participant in your business ventures. Yet, the evidence shows a woman who was terrified to speak, terrified to move, and terrified to say no. You treated her body as collateral and her inheritance as your property. I loved her, Brandon stammered, standing up halfway before his lawyer pulled him back down. I was just trying to build a future for us. Sit down, Mr. Cole, the judge ordered. She picked up her gavel. Based on the overwhelming evidence presented, including the digital trail provided by Nova Sparks Human Resources Department and the medical documentation of injuries, I am issuing a permanent restraining order. Mr. Cole, you are to have no contact with Ms. Chang. You are to stay 500 yards away from her person, her home, and her place of employment for a period of 5 years. She turned a page. Furthermore, regarding the Ruth Miller Trust, the activation of the duress clause filed by Mr. Holloway is hereby validated by this court. The trust is permanently sealed against any transfer to a joint account or business entity associated with Mr. Cole or the Chang family members listed in the petition. Ms. Chang is the sole beneficiary, and no power of attorney signed under this period of coercion shall be recognized. My mother let out a small gasp. That was it. The money was gone. The retirement plan they had built on my back was vaporized. Finally, the judge said, looking over her spectacles, I understand there is a matter regarding Mr. Cole's employment. Mr. Holloway nodded. Yes, Your Honor. The board of Nova Spark has submitted an affidavit. He handed a paper to the bailiff. I knew what it said. Jenna had sent me a copy that morning. It was a formal resolution from the investors. Due to the violation of the moral turpitude clause and the reputational damage caused by the live-streamed assault. Brandon Cole was removed as CEO, effective immediately. His equity was frozen pending a civil suit for damages. Brandon did not know this yet. I watched him as the judge read the paper. I watched the color drain from his face until he looked like a wax figure. He looked at his lawyer, who was busy packing up his briefcase, clearly realizing his client was a sinking ship. Everything? Brandon whispered. They took everything? He looked across the aisle at me. For the first time in 10 years, I looked at him and felt absolutely nothing. No fear, no love, no pity. He was just a man in a suit who had bet against me and lost. Court is adjourned, Judge Patterson said. The gavel banged, a sharp, final sound. I stood up. My legs were steady. Mr. Holloway shook my hand. You did well, Laura. Your grandmother would be proud. She gave me the key, I said. I just finally used it. I turned to leave. I had to pass the row where my family sat. My mother reached out a hand as I walked by. "Laura," she wept, "we didn't know. You have to believe us. We just wanted you to be happy." "No, Mom," I said, stopping for a brief second. "You wanted to be rich. There is a difference." "What are we going to do?" Tyler asked, his voice cracking. "The investors. They are pulling out. I am ruined." "I guess you will have to get a job," I said. "I hear the coffee shop downtown is hiring. It builds character." I walked past them. I walked down the center aisle, pushing through the heavy wooden doors of the courtroom. The hallway was bright. Sunlight was streaming through the high windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Jenna and Maya were waiting on a bench near the exit. They stood up when they saw me. There were no tears. There was no dramatic running embrace. We were soldiers who had survived a battle. Maya looked at my face, checking for sadness, and found none. Jenna checked her watch. Ever the professional. "It is done?" Maya asked. "It is done," I said. 5 years, and the money is locked." "And the job?" Jenna asked. "He is out," I said. "The board fired him." Jenna nodded, a small, satisfied smile playing on her lips. "Good. Then I guess we have a studio to run. The interim CEO asked if you would be interested in the head of content position, officially." I looked at them. The makeup artist who saw the truth and the HR director who weaponized it. They were my real team. They were the family I had chosen. "I might take a vacation first," I said. "I think I want to go somewhere where nobody knows my name. Maybe paint for a while." "You deserve it," Maya said. We walked toward the glass doors of the courthouse entrance. The world outside looked big. It looked chaotic. It looked messy. For the first time in my life, I didn't have a script. I didn't have a producer telling me where to stand. I didn't have a mother telling me what to say. I didn't have a brother telling me who to pay. I pushed the door open. The air hit my face. Crisp, cool Colorado air. It smelled of pine and exhaust and possibility. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs until they pressed against my ribs. It didn't hurt. My shoulder didn't throb. My neck didn't ache. I was alone, and it was the most beautiful feeling in the world. I stepped out onto the sidewalk, adjusted my sunglasses, and started walking. Not toward a studio, not toward a man, just forward. Freedom, I realized, wasn't a destination. It was just the ability to choose your own direction. And today, I was choosing me. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please leave a comment below and share your thoughts on Laura's journey. Don't forget to subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit the hype button to help this story be heard by more people.